This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
Good morning, Kentuckiana. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson of the Kentucky Liberty Caucus, here on Kentucky's Voice. Hopefully you're enjoying us right now on 970 AM. There's also a Facebook live stream. If you want to find Kentucky's Voice on Facebook, just click around there and you'll find that live stream. I think we're streaming live on YouTube as well. And then tonight, if you check your TV guide, if you've got Spectrum, we have a rebroadcast of the video of this interaction that we're going to have today, and that is on channel 21 on Spectrum. So thank you for coming in. We are a listener-supported ministry / radio show. So if you want to support that, go to kyvoice.org, kyvoice.org, and you can click on to donate and support the efforts that we're trying to have to bring riveting and conservative messaging to the Louisville area, which needs it quite a bit. The focus of today's show is going to be on religion and morality in public life. Specifically, we want to address the role of God, the role of morality, and the role of religion in our educational systems in various ways, both our public schools and in our private schools, as well as the role that the church and religion should play in politics, or vice versa. How should politics be interacting with our churches? My guest today will be Pastor Justin Walker of Salt and Light Academy and Church. So they have a Christian school. We'll talk about that later on, but he also has a thriving church in Pendleton, Kentucky. If you want to find out more information about that, you can go to saltandlightky.org. Spell all that out, saltandlightky.org. You can find out more about their Christian school that they've recently started, as well as their church and their ministry. Our other guest is Beanie Gohagen. Beanie Gohagen is the president and founder of an organization called Freedom in Education. She's also been involved in drafting as well as advocating for some political changes that affect some of our schools as they relate to what our children are exposed to in those schools. So our first topic of conversation is going to be about a decision by Oldham County Board of Education to deny LifeWise moral education to Oldham County public school kids. Producer, can we feed into a little bit of intro from Justin talking about this topic? Well, in that event, essentially what happened is the Oldham County School Board was presented with a proposal from an organization called LifeWise Academy. LifeWise Academy is run out of Ohio, but they actually have a ministry, and I will call it a ministry, that reaches out to public schools in which they take kids from public schools for up to 1 hour per day. 1 hour per week to take them off campus on a purely voluntary basis with no school funding and allow those kids to have biblical instruction or moral education off campus, bring them back to be integrated back into the school. Oldham County School Board had a proposal to implement this in just one elementary school, Locust Grove Elementary near LaGrange, Kentucky. When the board basically received this request in spring of this year, they've delayed it all the way into fall, and just last week they had a meeting of the board and they voted down in a vote of 5-0 to not allow LifeWise to implement that program for the students of LifeWise, for the students of Locust Grove Elementary. So we will talk probably for the first third of the show about that decision, what their justification for denying this was, what the law is as it relates to this, and the message that we think that the school board was sending to the students and to the parents of that school. So it should be riveting conversation. We'll also talk about some of the efforts that Beanie and her organization have had, and we'll talk about the role of politics in the pulpit and whether we should encourage pastors to speak out more and engage in our political system. Join us after the break.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson of the Kentucky Liberty Caucus. Today we have two special guests. We have Pastor Justin Walker of Salt and Light Academy and Salt and Light Church, as well as Beanie Gohagen of Freedom and Education. And we're going to be talking through the role of religion and morality in public life, and specifically talking about some of those things as they relate to education and to politics. Okay, so as I introed in the last segment, the Oldham County School Board was presented by an organization called LifeWise Academy to take on all of the cost, all of the logistics beyond getting the kids to the bus, of taking children from a public school to a Baptist church that had volunteered to host this, have probably 20, 30 minutes worth of moral education, maybe some biblical instruction, and to bring those children back to the public schools so that they can continue on without their school day. This would only take 1 hour per week. It would be totally voluntary and up to the parents whether they want their children to do this. And it would involve no advocacy or advocacy against this program by public school officials. The cost of the school would be purely, they call it de minimis, basically almost no cost, just a matter of getting the kids to the bus and then taking the kids from the bus and getting them back into class. Okay. Now, the Oldham County School Board had that meeting. They voted against this 5-0, and Pastor Justin Walker basically addressed this during his Sunday sermon, which we'll talk about this later. I think was an amazing thing to do. Pastors should be addressing the moral issues of our time, things that affect their parishioners, and he took the bold step of doing that. So let me just pass it off to Justin Walker. What were some of the criticisms that you had of this decision? We'll go through it, and we'll talk about the legal basis of this and what the actual objections were. We want to try to be fair to the other side, say what in their own words they said. But yeah, feel free, take over.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we heard as an objection was the logistical nightmare that it would cause to take kids out of class. And I would challenge that that's actually not true. The law, from what I understand, is that parents already have the ability to go and take their children out of school for 1 hour a week. That's right. And take them for moral instruction. So I want you to imagine with me that LifeWise isn't there, but what if some passionate pastor like myself could convince his congregation that, how many could fit on a bus? 80?
Right.
Imagine with me if 80 parents were standing in the school ready to sign their child out at a particular time each week. That would be a logistical nightmare.
Right.
Having someone provide a bus and saying, "Oh, come to our bus, and then we'll take you over to this church," and all we need is a parent's signature to say that they're allowed to do that. They actually made it a logistical dream, not a logistical nightmare.
Right.
So it's not accurate to say it's a logistical nightmare, but that's what they've said.
Right. And I want to hop in and just talk about that logistical nightmare. Number one, there's no talk of logistics in the actual law.
Yeah.
Basically, the law just says, if you approve this program, you shall implement it as long as the program that is requesting to do this checks off a bunch of these different boxes. None of those boxes related to logistics.
Yeah.
So what the state legislature basically said was, we trust that you're going to be able to figure out these logistical issues. What are we talking about here? So like the example I have is, we're here in Louisville. There's the UPS Worldport that's literally 5 minutes from our studio. They handle 200,000. Oh wait, is it 200 or 400,000? Either way, they handle literally hundreds of thousands of packages per hour. 300 planes come into and out of that facility every single day, and they have to manage 20,000 employees at that facility. All right. We've got Elon Musk that is now planning to send a manned mission to Mars. Okay, so we can't handle Jimmy, Susie, and Sally need to come to the principal's office, put them on the bus, and then when they get back, send Jimmy, Susie, and Sally back to the class that they're supposed to go to. That's the logistical nightmare. All right. So I don't agree with the framing whatsoever. I think you made a great point. If the existing law, and this law has existed since the 1950s, 1940, late 40s, I think. There's been rulings by the Attorney General of the state of Kentucky since 1960 on this, kind of talking about how to implement this sort of release time for moral education program. So the state legislature altered that law somewhat, arguably in ways that maybe they shouldn't have, and we'll try to clean that up next session. But the bottom line is this isn't a new program, and as you said, if they really wanted a logistical nightmare, it would be every one of these parents that's at all interested having the ability to come to the school, individually pick up their student for 1 hour, drive them out off campus, which apparently is even required if it's a parent, and then drive them back after they have that moral instruction. So this is actually a way to facilitate rather than cause a logistical nightmare.
Exactly.
What are some of the other objections that were raised? And he didn't really address this in the clips that we have online. If you want to find the clip from Justin where he talks about this very eloquently, it's about 5 minutes long. Go to Facebook and find a page called Raising Voices. Maybe 3 days ago, she posted about a 5-minute clip where Justin actually addressed this topic to his parishioners. One of the other objections that the school board had was there is a requirement in the law that whoever's providing this service have, quote unquote, adequate insurance to cover liability. If the kids are on a private bus that comes and gets them, what if there's a bus accident? Who's liable? Now, they did indemnify the school district. They did provide $5 million worth of insurance across the state of Kentucky. And right now, this program in the state of Kentucky is only implemented in Marshall County. There's about 6 schools in Marshall County that have had this a little over a year. McCracken County has approved this recently. So even that $5 million, if that's the current state of it, that's quite a bit of liability insurance. All right. But regardless of what it is, that portion of the law was just basically saying the school isn't liable for anything, and you work that out with the parents. If the parents want to have some amount of insurance, you figure out what that amount is to get that parent to want to engage in your program. The other major objection that the school board offered was, what are the kids going to do when they're not the kids that are not participating in this program? So we know that they're going to be some of these kids, and it probably would start small, 5, 10 kids. In other places, this program has been very popular and grown in popularity such that it can be up to hundreds of kids at some of these schools. But initially, it would be small. What happens to the kids that aren't engaging in the program? What are they supposed to do? And again, the board presented the perspective that what these kids were going to be doing is they would be forced all to go into study hall. Study hall, number one. First of all, study hall for a lot of kids, given that we have 30% reading proficiency rates, isn't the worst thing in the world. Let me just get that right out of the way. So it's not a nightmare that kids might have a little extra study time in school to engage in the things that they really need to be learning. But also in the law, it specifies that among the things that the kids can be doing is art, music, physical education. The classes that kids would be pulled out of would not be math, reading, science, social studies. It's what they call related arts, or kind of at higher levels, they call them electives. So if a parent wants their kid to engage in electives rather than, if they want their kids to engage in a moral education program rather than one of those electives for 1 hour a week, not only should we do it, but it actually isn't going to produce a burden on the kids that don't go. They're going to, if they're already in an art class or a PE class, they can continue on with some other art or PE related thing. You just can't penalize the kids that leave for the work that they miss. That's really the only requirement. So those were the objections. And so I want to address why I'm so passionate about this. All that's being asked here is for parents to have a little bit more say in the instruction that happens in their school than they currently have, even if that school is a public school. Remember, wealthy families already have what we call school choice. They have the ability to pull their kids out of school whenever they want and send them to a private school or probably homeschool them, depending on what their family dynamics are. The kids that don't have school choice are the ones who parents don't have the financial resources to engage in this sort of activity. And so all this was doing was allowing for 1 hour once a week to allow for a little bit more control of a parent over that. Most of the board, when they were campaigning for their slots, they said, I am a supporter of school choice. I want parents to have more say over what the education of their children look like. And then the tiniest bit of parental choice that they were allowed to actually implement. I support parents' choice. But when parental choice actually comes to them in a very easily packaged, an easy package for them to deliver to them, they refuse to do it. So that's and I'm sure you can hear over the radio my level of frustration. I'm sure Pastor, if you watch his video, you understand his level of frustration, and Beanie's. After the break, we'll get into some other elements of this case, but we'll also talk about other issues. Come on back.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
I got a notification on Wednesday night, late Wednesday night, that Oldham County had voted down for LifeWise to come into our county. LifeWise is a group that wants to come in, and they do this already. They already have this in other states where they come into schools and they say, since children are allowed to be pulled out for 1 hour a week for religious and moral instruction, here's the rule. You can't do it on school grounds. Has to be off of school grounds. Let that sink in for a second. You couldn't teach the Bible on school grounds. They say you got to do religious and moral instruction off of school grounds. And so they say you have to do it off of school grounds, and it has to be during like PE or music or art or something of that nature. So LifeWise says, hey, since you guys put all these stipulations, we're going to come in and we'll fund it. No cost to the school, no cost to the taxpayers, no cost to the parents. They simply come in based off of donations they get from other churches. They're part of another organization. They use their own funds to bring in a big red bus and let kids get on their bus, drive them to a local church, and then they get biblical and moral instruction, and then they have to get back to the school, and they have 1 hour to do it. And LifeWise provides that so that the parents can have a means of allowing their children, because how many of you are right now going, I would love to do that, but I don't have that. I work and mom works and everybody works, and so we can't go get our kids for an hour and take them out for religious and moral instruction. So LifeWise comes in and says, we will do this totally voluntary, cost the school nothing, cost the county nothing. All they needed was permission. And our good old Oldham County Board of Education 5-0 voted that down. I want you to let that sink in. By the way, somebody asked me, they said, what are you going to do if people showed up, because of your video last night, what are you going to do if people showed up from the school? Good. I hope you are here from the school. I hope you hear the truth. Maybe y'all share it with them.
So you were listening there to Pastor Justin Walker of Salt and Light Academy and Salt and Light Church in Pendleton, Kentucky, talking about the decision by the Oldham County Board of Education to deny LifeWise Academy the ability to implement a 1 hour per week moral instruction program, which is legal by Kentucky and federal law. I just want to talk a little bit, and I talked about this at the very end of the segment, why it was so frustrating to me. This was a denial of even the smallest bit of parental choice in public education by people who more or less had promised that they were going to be advocating for increased parental control over public education and responsiveness to the public. So another element of why this is so frustrating to me is I fear that this is going to be a precedent in the other direction. There was a lot of talk about how this might set a precedent for other organizations to engage in moral education by the school board. By the way, fantastic. If other people want to clear all of these different hurdles and provide religious and moral education to their kids, I'm all for it if they can cover all of the legal hurdles. But Oldham County is generally seen as a model public education system. And just so for reference, of the U.S. News and World Report rankings of the best high schools in the state of Kentucky, the three high schools that are in Oldham County are in the top 8. Number 1 and number 3 are Louisville area magnet schools, DuPont Manual and J. Graham Brown School. But North Oldham, South Oldham, and Oldham County are in the top 8 of, I think there's about 320 public high schools in the state of Kentucky. So they're seen as a model. And I want to be very clear about this. It isn't, we have fantastic teachers in Oldham County. The reason that Oldham County schools are so successful is because of the parents, parental involvement, and, of course, dedicated teachers. There are dedicated teachers in every district. But just so for reference, Oldham County has a median household income of $121,000. The next closest county in the state of Kentucky is Boone County or Spencer County at the high 90s, so $94,000 or $98,000. So $25,000 in household median income above the second highest county. So it's a very wealthy county. It's also a county with a lot of two-parent homes. And so let's not think that it's school board policy that makes Oldham County such a successful program. It's the involvement of parents in education as it is. Increasing that would not be a hindrance. All right. So the other topic that I want to talk about here is this is a problem, I think, for public education school boards in general. Beanie, and if you want to weigh in on this, I pulled the quote from the American Enterprise Institute. There's a quote from the American Enterprise Institute talking about the issues that we have with school boards in the United States, public school boards. And so I'll just read this quote, and I want to get your thoughts on that quote since you shared it on Facebook. The result of our current educational system is that we have well-intentioned board members who measure success by institutional satisfaction rather than student outcomes, and I would add in, and parental satisfaction. What they should be maximizing for is parental satisfaction and student achievement outcomes. What they are maximizing for is institutional satisfaction. They ask whether the superintendent's budget passed smoothly, or I'll add, or whether the superintendent reports that the teachers and the administrators are happy in their district, not whether their third graders can read or whether they are improving in their reading scores. For all of the attention that's paid to angry board meetings or book bans, and we'll talk about this in the next segment, especially with Beanie, if the American public is going to regain trust in their school boards, it needs boards willing to act less like boosters for the teachers or the administrators in their schools and more like fiduciaries of the public's interest and of the parents' interest in their schools. So, Beanie, you've engaged in some lobbying on what, and the American Enterprise Institute mentioned book bans. Can you just tell me a little bit about your experience in dealing with the Jefferson County public school system as it relates to those book bans?
Well, for the record, I have never actually participated in a book ban.
That's right.
I have never advocated for banning any books at all. What we have advocated for, Miranda Stovall and I have advocated for, is adults using wise discernment when curating the books that are accessible to children in schools and in school libraries. There is no values neutral education. There is a certain set of values that are met with much more many more obstacles than other values. Currently, the set of values that are welcome and shared very freely in our public schools tend to not align with Christian values. And so I think that it's disheartening that so many board members chose to vote against allowing this alternative for these students to be pulled out and to get that biblical formation. I'm not necessarily sure that I would have wanted all of my children's teachers to teach my children biblical truths, because some of them didn't believe in the Bible, were not Christians, and so I don't want them to be the Bible teachers for my children. However, if that opportunity comes up, then that would have been great to take advantage of. I would say even if they missed math class or science class once a week, because I think that this is absolutely very important. And I would be remiss to be able to talk publicly and not share a quote from C.S. Lewis. And so I'm going to share the quote from him. It says, "Education without values, as useful as it is, seems rather to make a man more clever or devil." And so I think that that's something really important to think about when we talk about the values that are taught in school. I like to use the word virtue instead. Values are subjective. They're fluid. They vary based on family and culture. Virtues are timeless and universal. And I think that is something that LifeWise would have offered through their biblical and moral teaching. I think it's something that could be brought in through literature. We talk about book bans. I'm like, you know what? Before we even talk about book bans, we need to talk about what is not being offered to these students. And that is really great quality literature that could cultivate some of these virtues that would be taught in these courses as well. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I think that was a great answer and very eloquent. And I think one of the initiatives that your organization, Freedom in Education, freedomined.org, implements is providing patriotic and virtuous literature to public schools so that they can replace some of these bad influences. Come back and join us after the break.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Let me explain to you what they just said to you on Wednesday when they voted down LifeWise. Let me help you with this. Because you have people, there's pastors. There was a pastor that said, I can't remember what his name was. I think it was G and Zero. And I think we got some G and Zeros in here. If it's your relative, let them know, come talk to me. I'd be happy to set that guy straight. He said, let the kid, this is what he said. He said, it's on the WLKY article. You can go see it for yourself. Just go on Facebook and look up the LifeWise getting shut down here in Kentucky or in Oldham County. You'll find this pastor. A pastor said, let the children learn without distraction. They should be getting ready for college and getting ready for their studies and whatever they need to be doing. This should be separate. You know what? Do you know what? You know what the board, the 5-1 board that voted against it? You know what? One of the things they said was, one of the reasons that they voted it down. I hope somebody from the school board's here. You know why y'all voted it down? Not maybe you. There's probably hundreds of other people in here that didn't vote it down. But you know why they voted it down? They said that it would be a logistical nightmare for the front office. Hang on, stop for a second. I need you to get a real picture. Let me help paint a real picture for you. Not only can you not have prayer in school, not only can you not have the 10 Commandments in school, you can't have Bible in school. You certainly can't teach it. You can't teach creation, and you can't mention God in the school. And now you know what they just said? We don't even want you to mention it outside of the school. From 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock every day, if you mention God to these kids are ours, and we're not talking about God to them. Oh, let it sink in what they've really told you about your children. There is no God, and you will never teach them that there is a God, because if you do, it's a distraction to what we're doing in this institution. And I tell you this, you don't think that's a sin? You don't think it's a sin that they're telling your children that they cannot, the important parts of our education cannot include God? They can look, can you all just imagine with me the tiniest little step, like the tiniest little step towards a believer, the littlest bit, like let us have the child for 1 hour once a week off campus. Can you imagine like the travel time alone by the time they get the kids over to that church to go here? I'm talking about that LifeWise example. By the time we get our kids over to this place, they might have, 15 or 20 minutes for some sort of a Bible lesson, and then they got to get them back on the bus and get them back over there. The tiniest little step.
By the way, I'm sorry, I just got to keep going here. Do you understand it really wouldn't be a logistical nightmare if you'd let us bring God into the school? Boy, it wouldn't be such a problem. We wouldn't have to bus them all the way over and have this logistical nightmare if we could just use a room. And here's the deal. Hundreds of parents showed up at that school board meeting to say that they wanted LifeWise, only for the school board 5-0 to say, no, you can't have it. Well, don't you understand how crazy it is that they would look at you and say, we don't want you to have anything to do with God, and so if you're going to do it, take it off campus. And then when somebody steps up and goes, okay, we'll take groups of kids off campus, they go, no, you can't have that. 5-0, no. I would love to see that reform. People say to me, they go, what happens if we really have a school for 1,000? What if the local schools wise up and start doing things better? I hope they do. I'm not against that. But here's the deal. They're falling on their own sword. And I don't know if you've paid attention or not, but they think they're invincible. They think they're invincible on the school board. They think they can vote whichever way they want and that we're not going to want to vote them out of there. They think they're invincible because they've got all the money. Listen, they make policies because they think, well, really, what are you going to do about it? That's what they do. They think that they're invincible. Well, you hear this. They're falling on their own sword, and it's going to bring disgrace.
That was Pastor Justin Walker. I'm here in studio with he and Beanie Gohagen. We're talking about the LifeWise decision right now of the Oldham County Board of Education to deny the ability of LifeWise Academy to pull children out for 1 hour per week in order to have moral or biblical instruction to return them back to school. That was some fiery language. So let me just go ahead and bring Justin on. Do you want to retract any of that or anything? There are some qualifications. The board didn't literally say there is no God. He was using some hyperbolic language. He was saying that's the message that's being sent by refusing to allow any mention of God in church for 8 hours every single day for every kid, the message that you were sending. So go ahead and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think you said exactly right. It's hyperbolic language. You can hear that in the beginning of the message. I said, let me tell you what they really said. So you asked me the question, do I want to retract anything? Nope, I'll double down. Right. There's no retraction there. With the communication that they gave us is that you are not allowed to talk about God, and that if you do, whatever excuse you give, whether it's unfair to other kids or it's logistical or it's insurance or whatever excuse you give, you're finding reasons to make sure that we do not bring God into school. And if you truly believe that Jesus, I'm saying this for myself, if I truly believe that Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and the only way to the Father is by him, I truly believe that Christ can redeem us and save us. And so if I believe that, then I want children to know that. And so you're never going to come to a place where I would say, we shouldn't put him there. Like God shouldn't be there. God doesn't have any part of that. He has a part in every bit of it because he is the one who can save. And so that's where the passion comes from, is to say, why would anyone not want someone to know about God? And in this case, even more passion because it was completely voluntary. LifeWise is completely voluntary. It would be different. I could understand a little bit more if we were saying, even though I'd be for it, if we were saying every kid has to go hear about Bible. I mean, I'm good with that, but I could see other people being really, really upset. But to say we can't have the option, Christian parents can't have the option, or a child who might be struggling and saying, hey, you know what, maybe this is an answer, they can't have the option to go and hear about God. Why would we not make that an option?
Right.
Can I just say something
absolutely.
here? That I just think it's interesting that the one pastor that you quoted said, these kids should be getting ready for college. And I can't think of a more important thing to do for children that will someday be going onto a college campus than to making sure that their foundation of their faith is so solid and so firm. Like parents out there, if you're listening to this, there is no math lesson, science lesson, history lesson, English lesson. This is coming from a former teacher that is more important than making sure that the foundation of their faith is rock solid before you send them onto a college campus. I say that as a mother of 4 who went off to college. So please don't. And the other thing too is you talk about, this is totally voluntary. LifeWise requires parental consent to teach a biblical worldview. Students in secular public schools are learning a particular worldview, and it is not biblical, and it is not Christian, and it does not require parental consent for them to necessarily be taught some of these things that are being taught. And I'm not saying that that's every teacher. I know that we have a great pool of Christian educators in public schools who are doing their best to be the hands and feet of Christ in these classrooms. And I'm so thankful for them. But I also know that there are teachers who are teaching a worldview that is completely opposite of the Christian worldview. And they're not asking for parental consent to do that. They're just doing it. And so I think that those are some really important things to think about here.
Absolutely. I want to talk about what the law actually is. What Pastor Justin was talking about is the implementation. The law actually allows far more discussion of the Bible, of God, of morality than we allow in our secular education because we have simply not demanded it.
That's right.
All right. It's that simple. So there's a public perception that the Constitution requires a quote unquote separation of church and state. That is not in the Constitution. What the Constitution in Amendment 1 of the Bill of Rights says is Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. In other words, the government can't force you to follow a particular religion or the prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So therefore, the government can't restrict the way that you practice your religion. That's all that it says. And so there's this perception, we got to keep religious topics away from public schools. That is not the case. The actual law, and this has been reiterated by our current Supreme Court. So this isn't from 150 years ago decisions. The current Supreme Court has emphasized that we can even have biblical instruction in our public schools if it's done in the context of the history of our country or as a historical document. Talking about the history of the Bible would be a permitted subject to have in school. And so let me just read our actual state law here. And this is something that I've never experienced, but this is within the power of our school boards to pass. As a continuation of the policy of teaching our country's history and as an affirmation of the freedom of religion in this country, the Board of Education of a local school district may authorize the recitation of the traditional Lord's Prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag in public elementary schools. So if the school board wanted to, a public school board wanted to, they could actually require the recitation of the Lord's Prayer to begin the day in public schools. I'm not currently demanding that, but that is how the perception of what is allowed to happen in a public school and what actually does happen in a public school are vastly different. Now, the Supreme Court case that actually established this release time program that we're talking about with LifeWise actually has the quote, "The First Amendment does not require an absolute separation of church and state, where the state and religion would be alien to each other, hostile, suspicious, and even unfriendly." That is not a requirement. That is Supreme Court precedence. And so a lot of the objections that you heard more from public, people online or the people that came and spoke to the public school board, there was a lot of objections of basically, I don't like this particular brand of Christianity that other people want their kids to learn about. And so therefore, they shouldn't be able to do it. All right. Or I don't want the kids to come back and talk at all about religion or moral or morality or God to the other kids in the school. I don't know how you can be a Christian and have that perspective. Did they forget about the Great Commission? I mean, that is a fundamental requirement of Christianity, is that you spread the good news to other people. Yeah, Beanie.
Students can do that anyhow. I mean,
exactly.
they have the right to do that, and hopefully they have the enthusiasm for their faith to do that anyhow. They can come back on a Monday morning after a wonderful sermon on Sunday and share, and they can share all day, every day if they want to, as long as it's not disrupting the class. So,
exactly. And I hope they do.
LifeWise isn't going to, make or break that.
Absolutely. 100%. All right. In our last segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about that role of pastors and churches in our current politics. Should we be advocating for political ideas for quote unquote political ideas in our pulpits? What are the legal limits and what actually is best practice? Come on back after the break. This is Kentucky's Voice.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson of the Kentucky Liberty Caucus here on Kentucky's Voice, 970 AM. Remember to catch us on Spectrum, Channel 21. Find it on your TV guide tonight. We'll have the video of this, and you can also go to the Kentucky's Voice Facebook or YouTube channels to get the video of this, the podcast. Today, we've been talking about religion and morality in public life and education and politics in particular. We focused a lot on public schools. Like how much should parents be able to influence the structure and including religious education of public schools? I want to transition a little bit into alternatives to the public schools. If you don't feel that the values and the virtues that are being taught in the public schools, which are largely a-religious or even anti-religious, what are some alternatives? So let me pass you off to Pastor Justin Walker. Salt and Light Christian Church has recently started their own tuition-free, and a lot of people online were talking about, Justin Walker is criticizing the school board because he's trying to funnel people into this money-making enterprise that is Salt and Light Academy. So can you dispel some of those notions for us?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do that real quickly. So here's an example for you. Last year, we opened our school completely tuition-free. You don't have to be a member of our church. You don't have to come to our church after you come to our school. You don't even have to be a Christian to come to our school. Our statement of faith says this is what our teachers will teach our students. This is what you're signing. Not that you already believe it. And so last year we took in 65 students at a cost of about $10,000 per child to the church. Yeah. So somebody said to me recently, I went to out west to Colorado and went to the school summit, and they said to me, "Wait a second, you said 65 kids at $10,000 a kid?" They said that's $650,000. Yeah, that's right. And this year we grew from we did K through 6 last year. This year we grew to K through 8, and we started with 105 students when we launched this year, and we'll do even more next year. That's the goal. And so, nope, there's no money being made. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of prayers being had to say, "Okay, Lord, help us." It's totally by donation, and the Lord funded all of it. We pay our teachers. I just want to dispel that too for anybody that says, "Oh, it's just a glorified VBS." Yeah. No, it is not. We have a kindergarten, first grade, second grade. We have teachers in every class. We have desks in the classrooms. Those teachers are paid. We have administrators. Those administrators are paid. So we are establishing a complete school, totally tuition free, all just based on donations.
Absolutely amazing. If you want to give to that effort, I want to encourage you to go to the website, saltandlightky.org, not .com, .org. saltandlightky.org. Every penny matters. And just for reference, Jefferson County Public Schools, they spend about $23,000 to $24,000. $23,000 to $24,000 per student. So the costs are massive. And when Justin Walker in his in the video that we showed mentioned that how they have all the money, that's what he's talking about.
That's right.
This comes out of your tax dollars. They're spending $23,000, $24,000 per student that you don't have any choice about. Whether you got kids or not in the school system, you've got to pay that. And Beanie. And so I know Pastor Justin also homeschools his own kids. Beanie, you've had some homeschooling experience with your own children. And Beanie, and I'll just throw this pitch out, Beanie has been a volunteer at a Christian school in inner city Louisville called More Grace Christian Academy. They're doing something very similar. Their pastor pulled a lot of their children out of public schools because their parents had no faith in what they were learning, and they saw the dismal performance rates for those student outcomes. And so they started that, and Beanie has been volunteering her time being a guest teacher, instructor, mentor. If you want to give to that, that is mymoregrace.org. mymoregrace, GRACE.org, if you want to give to that initiative. So, Beanie, talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, and actually, I'm going to do this under the umbrella of Freedom in Education as well, which, by the way, I'm not the president. I'm a co-founder and do other things, but I'm not the president. So, but thank you for that. I don't want that responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. But so one of the initiatives of Freedom in Education, of course, we want to improve public education. We believe public education is important. We also believe that it can be improved. It can actually provide excellent education for the students that are there. And we work with public education to make sure that it's improving. But at the same time, we also know that that isn't the best environment for every child to learn. And so what we do is help families who are looking for other options, whether that's homeschool, private school, micro school, homeschool co-op, that kind of thing. We worked with a lot of homeschool families and homeschool co-ops. In fact, I just visited a homeschool co-op the other day in Wilmore, Kentucky. It's called Wilmore Academy. And the mom who started it, she does not have a background in education, but she just, felt led to do this. They have 80 students that they serve. She said she has some families drive an hour away to do this. And so they serve the students from Tuesday through Thursday, and then the children are homeschooled on Mondays and Fridays. So there's different ways that can work. We also, are always happy to suggest potential curriculum that might work for different homeschool families, knowing that, again, it's going to be different for every child, and the parents who want to take on this homeschool, this as a homeschool parent of 9, that it's going to be different. And I can say, well, this curriculum works really great, and then maybe the math doesn't work really great for your child. And so, okay, that's fine. Then find a different math curriculum, and here's some suggestions for that as well. But I think what's really important for parents to know, and I think that looking at the incredible increase in homeschool parenting as well as the classical education movement that is happening right now, the parents are realizing my child's education is my responsibility. I have options that I can choose. Some of them are within my means and some of them are not. I wish here in Kentucky that voters would have allowed school choice so that, more options would be within means of more families. But they chose not to do that. So we'll see what happens next with that. But I think it's really exciting for this revival from parents to finally say, I actually can't pass the buck on this, that my child's education, whether they go to a school all day long or whether they get their education here at home, it's my responsibility at the end of the day. And it's my responsibility to make sure that the education they're receiving is excellent, not just okay, not just it's going to be fine to get them into college, but actually excellent education. Every child deserves access to that. And we are doing that at More Grace Christian Academy. And I shared something on my social media. People can find that on my Facebook or Twitter account or whatever of our 8-year-old, one of our 8-year-old students and the progress that he's made. He came to us not knowing his alphabet, not knowing how to read, not knowing, not a lot of support from home and that kind of thing. But it's amazing what students will do when the bar is set high, when the support is there, when the teachers have high expectations, the administrator has high expectations, that all students can actually learn and receive that excellent education. That's right. And so Beanie alluded to the constitutional amendment last year that failed on school choice. That isn't the end of the school choice discussion. Let me emphasize something. The Trump administration and the One Big Beautiful Bill actually passed the ability to get $1,700 per parent. I think it's actually per child, in reimbursement for a tax credit for educational expenses outside of the standard public school. However, it does require our state legislature in the next coming session to permit that. They basically have to put in a certification structure that this child is actually, attending a non-traditional public or a non-traditional education, and that there are legitimate expenses. But I'm certainly all for that. Hopefully, it would help cover some of the expenses. Maybe you have a $1,700 per child tuition next year. Just throwing that out as an idea. All right. And also the Trump administration, again, passed a regulation from the IRS that allows pastors to actually endorse political candidates
By the way, I'm not such a fan of that. But especially, and this has always been the law, pastors can advocate for political positions on topics of the day. So I want to pass that off to Justin Walker. A lot of the criticism of Justin was like, what is a pastor doing talking about something relevant in the culture from the pulpit? How dare he mention something that people really care about in their everyday lives beyond, of course, the gospel. And that needs to be the core message of every pastor. There's no argument about that. But talk a little bit about engaging in the culture and addressing hot political topics of the day from the pulpit.
Yeah, I would say that, first of all, I totally agree with you that, I would caution pastors against endorsing a candidate just because candidates lie. And,
right.
They don't have to be honest. And so you're taking a big risk to say, I'm going to stand with this guy. I think that we can say we stand with their policies and this is what they stand for. And
right.
we should be able to do that. And most of the time, what I found is that when you stand for the right policies and then the person who's behind those right policies, people can put together for themselves and go, oh, well, that person,
right.
Who they're endorsing. And I say that to say that pastors absolutely have the responsibility to engage not just their lane of the gospel. The gospel applies to absolutely every area of our lives.
It should.
And so it's not a relegated, like, well, push this to the back burner. No, it's like, this is our children when we're talking about education. But if it's not that, whatever policies we're making or laws we're making or protected classes we're making, all of these things are based on somebody's moral values. And if no one projects that moral value should actually come from God and that we have a relevant source to find that, which is his word, then who's going to do that? No one.
Right.
Like, we can't give it to the school or anyone else. So I'm all for pastors getting into the middle of the politics. And to be honest with you, if the law came out and said, well, you'll lose your tax exempt status, that's perfectly fine. There was a time they went out and did it in the fields, and I'll go do that too. So,
right.
Send me out and make me go to a park, arrest me on the public square. The pastor has a responsibility to say that this is what's happening in our culture and this is what shouldn't be happening. For anybody who objects with that, I would point out John the Baptist. He got his head cut off because he looked at Herod and said, you shouldn't be married to your brother's wife or whatever. And so, this is not a new idea.
Right.
My youngest son, it was a couple of years ago, and I was just sort of getting involved on the political scene a little bit. And he said, I hate politics. And so he was 19 at the time. And I said, I hate politics too, but worse, I hate being governed by people who don't share the same principles and, values as
That's
me.
right.
And so it's really important that we are involved in politics as much as we may dislike it, that if we don't, somebody else is going to choose who governs us. And I'm not okay with that.
I think that's right. All right, we're coming up to the end of our show. I want to encourage you to find us on YouTube, Kentucky's Voice. I think it's actually the KY Voice on YouTube. There's the live stream that will be on Facebook. Check out Channel 21 on Spectrum TV. I'm not sure what time, maybe 4 p.m. There'll be a rebroadcast of this. And I want to thank you for joining. If you want to give to Kentucky's Voice to support this radio program, that's kyvoice.org. If you want to support Justin Walker and his Salt and Light Academy, you can go to saltandlightky.org. And if you want to support the initiatives of Beanie and her organization, Freedom in Education, go to freedomined.org. Thank you for your time.